Hi, my name is Cole from FCP Euro, and today we're going to show you how to replace the thermostat on your G05 BMW X5. In front of us, we have the OE kit for the G05 X5 behind us with an N63 engine. Now, the thermostat kit comes with a Waller OE thermostat. OE means that that's going to be the thermostat that comes with the vehicle from the factory. So why spend the extra money on a genuine part when you can get the same exact thing for a better price? Now, our kit also includes all of the one-time use hardware that we're going to need, a seal for the air intake pipe, and the Zurex HT12 coolant that this vehicle needs. So when do we need to replace the thermostat on our N63 equipped X5? Well, we've seen thermostats usually fail anywhere from 40 to 50,000 miles. However, we've also seen them fail at 20,000 miles. So it really just depends on your specific vehicle and looking for the symptoms that could indicate we have a failing thermostat. Now, what are some indicators that our thermostat is failing? We can have poor heat inside the cabin, coolant leaks, cooling system performance, so if the car cannot get hot enough or the car is too hot, and we can also have check engine light codes. Now that we have all that covered, let's go over all the tools we're going to need for this DIY. We'll need an arrangement of sockets including an 18mm, 16mm, 10mm, 8mm, and 6mm. We'll need a couple specialty sockets including a T60, T40, E12, and E8. An assortment of ratchets and different length extensions, and torque wrenches ranging from 8 Nm all the way up to 56 Nm. An assortment of different prying tools, different size flathead screwdrivers, and some 90-degree picks. Needle nose pliers, trim panel popper tools. Optionally, to make the job a lot easier, we have some electric ratchets here and an electric screwdriver. And lastly, a coolant vacuum system filling tool. Now that we've gone over all the tools that we're going to need, let's get into replacing this water pump. Before we hop underneath the hood, we're going to have to deactivate the air suspension in our X5 if your vehicle is equipped with it. To do that, we're going to press the start button 3 times quickly. You'll see there's a couple messages on the dash, a couple blinks, and then it'll say diagnostic mode active. Once we see that message, we're going to press down on this air suspension switch for 7 seconds and then release. Once you see that light turn off on the level setting, that means that we are in service mode for the air suspension. Now let's turn off the ignition and hop underneath the hood. Now that we're here, we're going to start removing all of the plastic trim panels so we can start disassembling the engine bay to access the thermostat. To remove this trim panel, we're going to need a trim removal tool or a flathead screwdriver will do. This definitely makes the job easier. We're going to get underneath the top portion of this plastic rivet, pop it up, and then remove the whole rivet itself. We're going to remove the 6 plastic rivets per side and then move over to the driver's side. Up top by the cowl, there's going to be 2 more rivets per side that we're going to have to remove. On the passenger side, we're going to want to flip open the washer fluid cap and then take a small screwdriver and depress the tab, holding it on, and then remove it by sliding it forward and pulling it out. Before we fully remove these panels, we're going to have to pop this rubber strip out of the plastic piece. And if you look closely down here, you'll see all these little plastic clips that hold this rubber seal onto the plastic trim piece. So we'll just get underneath of it and slowly pry them up. There will be 3 of these clips that we have to remove per side, and then we can pull these panels out. We can now fish these covers out of the engine bay. Now, before removing this panel completely, we're going to have to release the clips on the hood cable bracket. To do that, we'll take a pair of needle nose pliers and slightly pinch these clips to collapse them, and then we can push it through. To continue to disassemble all of the braces in the engine bay, we're going to need an 18mm socket, a long extension is handy, and then we have an electric ratchet, a normal ratchet will do, but we're going to want to remove these one-time use bolts, and there's going to be 6 of them that hold these cross braces on. With those 6 bolts removed, we can remove the upper 2 strut braces. And before we remove these 2 front cross braces, we'll take an E12 socket and remove these 2 screws. We're going to want to remove all the wiring from this cross brace. So we'll take a trim tool here, slide it underneath this wiring holder and remove it. Starting to remove all of the hardware on this cross brace, we'll take a T40 socket and remove these bolts. Take a 15mm socket and remove the 4 top bolts. With all the bolts now removed, we can slide this cross brace back a little bit and fish it out. We'll now pop this cable out of its holders and remove the 7 T40 bolts holding this cover on. Now we can slide this panel out of the way. At this point, let's raise the vehicle, disassemble some things underneath so we can start to drain the coolant. We're going to remove the 16 8mm screws to remove this plastic belly pan. Before draining the coolant, we're going to want to remove the coolant reservoir cap. Now, these newer BMWs do not have a coolant drain screw on the bottom of the radiator, so we're going to use a big hook to come up and release the lower radiator hose from the thermostat assembly. So we'll take our pick here, fish it up into the engine bay, and come over and remove one side of the clip. There it is. It's a good idea to remove this clip completely because if it's still installed, sometimes it can catch and not allow you to remove that coolant hose easily. Now that we have this removed, we're going to set it aside and remove the rest of the hose from the thermostat and drain the coolant. The best way to reach in and grab that coolant hose is going to be on the passenger side in between the frame rail and the sway bar. So we're just going to reach in here, grab it, and start giving it a tug. We're going to let the coolant drain out of this vehicle down to a drip, and then we're going to go back up top to start disassembling even further. We're going to start removing some items so we can remove the fan assembly. Since all the coolant is removed, we can start taking some of these coolant lines off to make it a little bit easier to access some stuff down below. We just pop this top clip off and we can remove this coolant line. Setting that coolant line aside, it's a good idea to remove this electrical connector here. Taking our pick, we're going to remove this clamp on the upper radiator hose, take it off, and disconnect the hose. There we go. We'll take our pick and remove the clip on this coolant fitting right underneath the upper coolant fitting, and then disconnect this connection. Sometimes a pry bar can be used to gently pry the fitting off. There we go. Coming down here, we'll take our pick again, remove this clip. Taking our pick, we'll get right underneath here on this wire holder and then remove it. With that hose now disconnected, we can push it backwards and tuck it underneath to give us a little bit more access. At this point, we need to remove the auxiliary water pump from the fan shroud itself. So we'll take a pick, come back here and unclip this. It's very tight, but we'll show you in a second, and then remove the electrical connector once this pump is out and free. This is the tab that we're gonna have to depress and then pull upward with the pump to remove it from the radiator fans. Now over on the passenger side, we can push this wiring grommet out of the fans, release the connector. There's one more wiring connector down below that we're going to want to move the lock to the unlock position on it with our pick, slightly press down and remove. Now with those two electrical connectors disconnected, we can take this harness and tuck it off to the side. Now we're just going to continue to remove all these coolant connector clips and remove the coolant hoses. Since we already removed the lower coolant hose from the thermostat, once we disconnect it from the radiator, we can actually pull the hose all the way up and out. Down below the lower radiator hose, there's going to be another coolant pump that we're going to have to release the clip just like the other side, pull up and set it to the side. With the electrical connectors removed on the passenger side, we will press down on this tab right here, shimmy it up, move over to the driver's side and do the same. With those two tabs now released, we can come here with a flat screwdriver or a pick, remove this holder for this coolant hose. Now with everything unclipped, we're going to start removing the fans. Be sure to be cautious of all the coolant hoses and wiring connectors down there, and we don't tug and break anything. Now with the radiator fans removed, we have a piece of cardboard here that we cut from one of our FCP Euro boxes, and this is just going to get slid right down into the radiator area to protect it. Okay. Now we can start removing the engine cover here and pulling all the intake parts off to remove the passenger side charge cooler. Now we'll come over to the oxygen sensor connectors and disconnect them. As you can see, some of the plastic in the engine bay is very fragile, so just take your time when removing some of the electrical connectors. You may break some of the holders, and we'll show you how to fix that later. Now with the oxygen sensor connectors removed, we can fish all of this wiring out of their holders and lay it up top. We'll do that with the same on the driver's side. With a 6mm socket or a flathead screwdriver, we're going to want to loosen the clamps for the intake. Before we can remove the rest of this air box, we're going to have to remove the air intake pipes down below. And the way that we're going to do that is pinch the connection on both sides, here down by the radiator. It is very, very tight. As you can see, I am wrestling this out. Now with the front side of this air duct out, we can take a pick, get right underneath here, and pull it out. With the passenger side duct removed, we're going to repeat that process on the driver's side. This side is a little bit more complicated because there's some coolant hoses here. It might be a good idea to release this coolant hose here with a clip on the reservoir, and that is just to give you a little bit more room. Now with all of our connections on the airbox itself, either loosened or removed, we can pull the airbox off the grommets that it is attached to, and we're going to be doing that by just giving it some good force, pulling upwards. It may be challenging because it's deep inside the engine bay, but they are on rubber grommets. Once the airbox is loose, we're going to want to fish these wires down through the hole so we can remove the actual airbox. Now to remove this clip on the turbo outlet hose, we're going to have to take a 90-degree pick right here, pop off this retaining clip. There's going to be one on both sides, and this is just to hold that clip down, and we'll pop these back in later. Now with those two safety clips removed, we can pull the passenger side turbo outlet clip off and remove the hose from the turbo. Take your 90-degree pick again and remove this clip, and then remove the connection. Now the last connection we have to remove is removing this clip down on the turbo inlet and pulling that inlet pipe off. Since we are removing this charge cooler, we're going to want to start disconnecting all the electrical connectors and surrounding items to remove this assembly. So we're just taking the electrical connector off of this purge solenoid here. Now with this plug removed, we'll take a pick or a flathead screwdriver, get underneath here and start pushing this rubber grommet off of this tab. Now with the vacuum solenoid disconnected, we can unclip it from the coolant tank in the front here. Coming back over to this bracket, someone else has been in here, so this is actually coming off of the vehicle because one of the clips is broken. However, we can actually remove this whole bracket from underneath. It's a bit tricky, but it's definitely easier with this removed from the bracket. But now that that bracket's free, we can take our 90-degree pick, come in that spot, release that clip, and pull this plastic bracket out altogether. Now, working our way down, we'll remove this electrical connector by pushing the lock downwards. This can be a little difficult. Sometimes a pick definitely aids in this. Now, as you can see, I was super gentle with trying to get that locking tab off that connector, and we can reinstall that locking tab. However, as long as you don't break the other locking portion of it, you can reconnect that connector. So if that happens to you, you can always take a pick and gently press up on that tab so we can remove this connector. Now we'll grab a 90-degree pick and remove this clip on the coolant fitting here and remove the fitting. With a 10mm socket, we'll remove these two screws to pull this fitting off. Be careful, this is plastic, so we're just gonna wanna wiggle this out and be gentle. Now, coming over to this coolant line, we're gonna wanna pull up a little bit, push it over to the side, grab a 10mm socket, and remove this screw. We're now going to come down to the lower part of the charge cooler and take this wiring harness and push it over to the side so we can come down with a 90-degree hook and remove this clip. Before we can remove the charge cooler, one last coolant hose, we're just gonna pop out of its holder here. Now we can take the charge cooler and slide it upwards, tilt it back a little bit, take a 90-degree pick to remove this last coolant hose. Pull the clip off, and then wiggle that hose off. We will now remove this full charge cooler out. Now there is the thermostat. It took a little bit to get to, but we now have access with the passenger side charge cooler removed. So we'll come down here and disconnect the electrical connector on the thermostat. And with a E8 socket with an extension, we can come down and remove the 3 bolts on the thermostat. Now, before we install our new thermostat, we're gonna wanna check the water pump housing to make sure the old seal did not stick to it. And in our case, it did. So we're gonna remove this, make sure that mating surface is clean, and now install the new thermostat. With our new thermostat in our hand, we can see that the new seal is already pre-installed on the thermostat. Now with our new thermostat, we're gonna lower it down into the engine bay and mate it to the water pump housing. We're gonna wanna make sure that the connector is facing upwards. Then we'll take one of the 3 bolts and thread it in by hand. Once the threads are started, it's definitely easier to take the socket and extension without a ratchet on here and just continue to thread these bolts in until the thermostat is flush with the water pump housing. Once all of these bolts are flush and hand tight, we're going to come back with our torque wrench and torque these to 10 Newton meters. With that all tight, we can take our connector here for the thermostat and plug it back in. Before reinstalling the passenger side charge cooler, we're going to want to take a look at this lower seal here on the assembly itself. And it isn't required to replace this at this time. However, it's a really good idea to change it out now because we would have to go through all the steps to change it again. Now, this seal is to seal all of the air that goes onto this charge cooler, and it can wear out over time, so we're just going to replace it now. And this seal is going to be linked in the description below. This seal is directional, so we're going to want to make sure that the taper goes downwards towards the inside of the charge cooler, not like this. So we'll just take it and slide it into this groove here and run our finger around to make sure that it is properly seated. With the new steel installed, we're just gonna clean around the area to make sure there's no debris in there, and then take a finger coated with oil and lightly lubricate the seal with engine oil. Now we can reinstall our clip here and install the charge cooler into the engine bay. Now, before dropping the charge cooler down here, we're gonna wanna reinstall our clips on the 2 coolant fittings for the charge cooler. Now, with the passenger side charge cooler, we're gonna fish it down there, but do not click it in yet. Once it is down in position, we will grab this lower cooling fitting and reinstall it onto the charge cooler. Make sure you hear that audible click. Now we can tilt this charge cooler back while making sure we're not going to pinch any wires, and press down. We want to make sure this charge cooler is locked in place, so giving it a little tug up and down to make sure it's not going anywhere. Now we're going to want to clip this coolant hose into its holder here, and route the other coolant fitting underneath and clip it into place. Now taking the long 10mm bolt we removed earlier, we'll take our 10mm socket and thread it in by hand and torque this bolt to 8 Nm. With that bolt now tight, we can take this coolant line and press it down into its holder. Now we can take this crossover tube, rub some glass cleaner over the seal just to lubricate it a little bit, slide it in, and then reinstall our hardware. These bolts are going to be torqued to 8 Nm. Before reinstalling the air intake pipe to the turbocharger, we're going to have to take a 90-degree pick, get in here, and get behind this seal and remove it, because in our kit we do include a new air intake seal. So this is the new O-ring. Now this seal is directional and we're going to want to install it like this. So we'll push it into the pipe and just work it into its groove. We're going to take a light coat of engine oil and just wrap it on that seal, and then take the clip that we removed from it earlier and reinstall it onto this pipe. Pulling back the pressure hose, we're going to drop this down and then push it on until it clicks. Now we can take the clip that we removed from this breather line, reinstall it, and clip it onto the intake tube. Now, before installing the turbo outlet hose again, we're just going to want to inspect the seal to make sure that there's no damage there. And if there is, we're going to want to replace this. Everything looks good here, so we're just going to take a little bit of engine oil on that seal, reinstall the clip, and then clip it back onto the vehicle. Now, these little locks that we removed from that charge pipe when we disassembled it, we're going to try to reinstall them. However, these are very fragile and they can bend very easily. So if you've completely destroyed them when taking it off, don't worry. They're not absolutely required, but they're nice to have. Be very careful. These are super small and they're very easily to pop out of your hand. We're going to now take this connector, plug it back into this purge valve, and then reinstall the plastic bracket that we took off earlier. This just clips in to the bottom here, just like that. Now we can take the wiring and put it back in its holder and clip that in. To put this purge valve back onto its holder, it's definitely helpful to spray some glass cleaner in the rubber so this slides on a little bit easier. Now we can take the electrical connector for the pressure sensor down here, plug it back in, and push the lock in. Take this hose and push it back into the holders on the coolant tank. Now taking some glass cleaner, we'll just lubricate these grommets so they slide on a little bit easier. We're going to want to grab the oxygen sensor wiring, fish it through this hole, and now reinstall the intake. Once these boots are now slid over, we can firmly press down this air box and make sure that it is properly seated. Now taking the oxygen sensor wiring, we're just going to place it back in the wiring holders. Now taking the oxygen sensor connector, we're going to want to plug each bank back in. Once they're plugged in, we can lower them down into the holder. If your bracket is broken like this, we can use a zip tie to hold this into place. We can now come back with a 6mm socket or a flathead screwdriver and tighten down all of these clamps. We don't want to go too tight with these. because it is plastic, but we want to make sure they're nice and snug. Now, reinstalling this air duct, you'll see that the passenger side air duct has some grooves that are a little bit clearanced on the inside, and those are going to face the engine. So that's how we can indicate that this is the passenger side air duct. So we're gonna slide this into the air box first before positioning the other side down by the radiator. All right, we're gonna wait to hear that click, give it a little tug. Once that's slid in, we'll see the tab protrude in that little opening there. Now we're going to push back a little bit towards the front of the vehicle and lower this down into place. Now, a little trick here, if you're having a hard time getting these air ducts in, is you can actually pull up on this air box a little bit to give us some more room. We just want to be very careful not to tug on this pipe too hard. Since this is now lifted a little bit, it'll give us a little bit more room to guide that air duct down. Now we can slide this forward and clip it in. Now with the other air duct, repeat the same steps on the driver's side. If you did release the grommets, this is the time to press down on the intake and make sure everything is connected. Now we can take this coolant hose, fish it back over, reinstall the clip, grab a little bit of coolant, wipe it on the seal, and then clip it back onto the coolant reservoir. Now we're gonna remove our cardboard protection piece and slide the radiator fan back into place. Guide this down very gently. Be sure to check that it's not tugging on anything. Once this is now lowered down into the engine bay, we're gonna line up the clips and press down. Now take this little holder here, open it up, and start putting this coolant hose back into its resting place. And once it's in position, we can tighten this. We're now going to connect the auxiliary water pump back onto the clips for the radiator. Now this is very tight, so we're showing you where it needs to clip in from the top here, and we are going to now reinstall this. Now taking this wiring harness, we will clip the holder back onto the fans. On the passenger side, we'll just take a little bit more fresh coolant, lubricate these fittings, and reconnect the coolant hoses. We're gonna take the harness that we routed to the side, reroute it into the engine bay, and start to connect all of the electrical connectors. This one has a lock, so be sure to press the lock back in. Now we can take a clip, put it back on this coolant fitting here, lubricate the seal with our finger, and reconnect it to the radiator. We're gonna take our brace here and fish it underneath of this hood cable, slide it underneath this plastic, and clip back in the hood cable. Take this front cross brace and slide it into place. You may need to pull back on the hood latches a little bit to get it to slide in. We're now going to reuse all of the hardware here and thread it all in. We want to keep these a little bit loose right now because we want some play to be able to line everything back up. Using a 16mm socket, we are going to start to snug up all of these bolts, paying attention to aligning it to where it used to sit. One way we can see where it was sitting is the mark of the washer on the actual brace. Torque these 4 bolts to 56 Nm. With a T40 socket, we can now thread all of these bolts in and torque them to 19 Nm. Now we're gonna push all of these wire holders back into their locations on this cross brace. Before reinstalling the engine cover, we'll just take some glass cleaner here and spray down these rubber grommets so this can slide on a little bit more easily. We're just gonna push down, make sure it is sitting nice and flat. Now with both of these strut tower braces for the back, you're gonna wanna look for this indentation, and that indentation is gonna wanna face the front of the vehicle. So with the included new one-time use hardware in the kit, we're gonna thread these bolts in and tighten all these bolts down. The notched end goes towards the back of the firewall. With an 18mm socket, we're gonna just thread these bolts in, come back with our torque wrench and torque them to 56 Newton meters and an additional 90 degrees. Once we've torqued initially to 56 Newton meters, with our angle torque wrench here, we're going to set it to 90 degrees. Now, if you do not have a torque wrench with angle on it, you can always use a Sharpie or a paint pen to mark one end of the bolt and then approximately 90 degrees to mark the body. Now grabbing the other cross braces, we are going to want the step side towards the front cross brace. And we're just going to lay these on here and thread in our hardware. This hardware is also one-time use and is going to be included in this kit. Now taking our torque wrench, we're going to torque these two bolts to 56 Newton meters and then come back with an additional 90 degrees. Now on these front bolts here, we're going to take a E12 socket and torque these to 28 Newton meters. Now we're going to take the driver's side engine bay cover and reinstall it into the vehicle. We can remove this little weather stripping here just to make installation a little bit easier and fish this in. Once this is sitting flush, we can now come back with our plastic rivets and reinstall them. We can now reinstall this weather stripping by taking this groove here and just sliding it over the cowl. We want to tuck it in right here and then just make sure it's all the way pressed down. On the driver's side, we can take the hood cable bracket and clip it back in. Now we can reinstall this weather stripping on the plastic piece. Now we can repeat that process on the passenger side. Now we can take our window washer fluid reservoir cap and clip it back into place. All right, you should be pretty proud of yourself because we just reassembled the vehicle minus the belly pan. At this point, we're gonna be filling the low temperature and high temperature coolant circuits. We're gonna be using the Zurex HT12 coolant that this BMW X5 takes. We're going to have to mix this coolant to a 50-50 ratio. So we're gonna pour the contents of this into a 5-gallon bucket. And then we will put the same amount of distilled water to mix this coolant. We're now going to set up our vacuum fill tool on the high temperature circuit. The system is now pulling all the coolant inside of all the coolant passageways, and then once this is done, we're going to move over to the low temperature circuit. Moving on to the low temperature circuit, we're going to remove this cap here and repeat that same process. Now we can put this cap on, and I'm going to meet you in the car after this to go over the electronic coolant bleeding procedure. This coolant bleed procedure is going to be running for 11 minutes. So if you have a weak battery, it might be a good idea to put it on a charger or use a jump pack when doing this. To start the procedure, we're going to hit this engine start stop button 3 times quickly. Next, we're going to go over to the hazard button and turn that on. And then go over to our headlights and turn on the low beams. Once that's done, we are going to go all the way up on temperature in the cluster here for the HVAC system. And then we are going to turn our fan speed all the way down to the first level. Once that is done, we want to ensure that it is not in the Eco Pro mode. So we're going to hit that comfort button. And now we're going to hold down the accelerator pedal for 10 seconds and the procedure should start. Once that service function has started, you'll see a message on the dash that says service function started. Just a reminder, when doing this bleed procedure, do not touch anything in the car or open any doors, or else the system will stop. Once your service function for bleeding the coolant is complete, you're going to see a message on the dash that says service function finished, and it will make an audible tone. Now let's go back into the engine bay and check the coolant level on both systems, wash it down with some water, and then go underneath to put the belly pan back on. Back underneath the vehicle, we can now reinstall our belly pan and install all of the 8mm screws. And with the belly pan now all installed, that wraps up this thermostat DIY. If you like what you saw in this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, drop them in the comments section below. And if you want to see more videos on the G05 X5 chassis, hit that subscribe button. My name's Cole from FCP Euro. Thanks for watching. Keep on wrenching.